Although the largest youth protest in decades in India has ended, Modi's government is facing a challenge from activists over the use of AI-powered surveillance at the protest at Jantar Mantar. There was the Ikshana surveillance van equipped with AI cameras and facial recognition technology, and the Delhi police also recorded protesters' Instagram handles. Now, the challenge before the Delhi High Court is that the protesters have asked the court to declare the mass surveillance of protesters unconstitutional, direct the government to destroy all personal data collected during the demonstration, and order the framing of guidelines on how surveillance technology can be used. The government, on the other hand, maintains that such checks were legal and in the public interest to ensure law and order. The activists have also made another argument. Accountability must flow both ways. If India uses facial recognition to track protesters, then it should also be used to identify police officers who allegedly acted without name badges during the crackdown. This case actually raises a really important question. What exactly can governments do with this kind of surveillance? Now, we are still at an early stage in India when it comes to AI surveillance. But recent research from China, where state surveillance is much more extensive, examines how governments can use this surveillance through two different channels. What this research finds, and I think this is quite a brave study, is that the surveillance operates at two levels. One is the digital mass surveillance of citizens, for example, through facial recognition software. But there is a second layer, surveillance of the agents who are themselves responsible for monitoring citizens. In China, these are what they are called grid workers. The government can track their real-time GPS locations, require them to upload photos and videos, and use digital systems to analyze whether they are actually doing their jobs. So in a way, mass surveillance is not just about controlling citizens, it can also be used to control the people who are supposed to carry out the surveillance and repression, such as the grid workers in China and potentially other frontline state agents like the Delhi police. Now, the researchers argue that agent-facing surveillance reduces what we call the principal-agent problem. The government may want its agent to patrol an area, report suspicious activity, or intervene when mobilization begins, but how does it know whether those agents are actually doing their jobs? Digital tools such as GPS tracking, automated reporting, and AI-based performance matrix make the agent's efforts observable in real time. This can compel them to act more diligent in their monitoring, reporting, and prevention tasks. What the study finds is that each layer of surveillance, whether citizen-facing or agent-facing, independently reduces the number of protests. Two layers also appear to reinforce each other. Protests decline most in cities where both forms of surveillance are present. Finally, and most importantly, the mass surveillance of citizens does not automatically translate into effective control. Someone still has to act on the information that the surveillance system produces. The study finds that roughly 1/3 of the protest-reducing effect of citizen surveillance operates through increased oversight of these grid workers, these agents. So surveillance becomes more effective not simply because the state knows more about citizens, but because it can also make sure that its agents act on that information. This is also important because it tells us something about the mechanism. Surveillance of grid workers had no effect on online grievances. If people were simply frightened by the existence of surveillance and were censoring themselves everywhere, we should expect online grievances to decline as well. But they did not. This supports the argument that what is happening is active prevention by monitored workers rather than a simple general chilling effect on citizens. Grid workers operate in physical spaces and are responsible for routine monitoring, conflict mediation, patrolling, and incident response. They are not responsible for policing online activity. So people may continue expressing grievances online even while the state's capacity to prevent those grievances from turning into physical collective action becomes stronger. Coming back to India, this case of surveillance of youth protesters at Jantar Mantar raises the possibility that surveillance infrastructure, initially justified for monitoring crowds and ensuring law and order, could eventually become part of a much broader system of protest management. The Ikshana surveillance van, equipped with AI-enabled cameras and facial recognition technology, shows the kind of infrastructure that is already being deployed. And as the China study shows, such technologies can potentially be used in a two-layer system, not only to monitor protesters directly, but also to monitor the state agents responsible for managing protests. And therefore, I think what we need is a clear law and much greater transparency from the government about what exactly is being deployed, how these technologies are being used, and what data is being collected, and how long it will be stored, who has access to it, and what safeguards exist around its use. These questions will become more and more important as the use of AI becomes more common and governments gain greater capacity to surveil their own citizens and analyze that data and potentially repress collective action against them. Thank you so much for your attention. I'll see you next time with another important question at Devil Wears Data.